that
That's
better?
perfect. Yeah, perfect.
Brilliant. There we go.
Okay, well, Rich, good to see you. Thanks for jumping on. I suppose that's a phrase actually, isn't it? From jumping on is only a sort of like last 2 years really. That thanks for jumping on. It's not quite as easy as jumping on though, is it? Because you've got to get the light right and get
That's
everything.
it. Yeah. I've hijacked Josie's office.
Have you?
Yeah, I've hijacked her office because the lighting in the lounge and everything just was. I was squinting because the sun's, despite the rain, it's actually really bright, the sun at the moment. So
yeah, it's a lovely day. I look outside and it's spring is here. It's my favourite time of the year. We've got my blue tree, which is a ceanothus. I don't know how many of the other ones I know, but like the blossom and everything, it just makes you feel good, doesn't it? When you've got things that are growing outside.
Absolutely. And it's bright.
It's lovely and it's bright. And I suppose growing inside, and that wasn't a tactical thing, but it's probably a good link into sort of seeing where we're at. And that's the sort of thing that I want to really explore with you today if I can. So my first introduction to the science of physicality, nutrition and things was really listening to Joe Rogan and George Lockhart a few years ago. He said, Joe Rogan asked him, he said, what's your aims now? He'd done Conor McGregor, and he did Tyson Fury. He said, what are your aims? And he said, I want to look after all of the MMA fighters. And he said, what, all of them? And he was like, yeah, I mean, because I know what I know, and I know that what the science is different for everybody. But a lot of guys just have a protein shake from their mate in the gym, and then they just crack on. And he was talking about where the salt opens up this element, and that's good for this. So no salt is something that some people hear, but it's good for some things. And I thought, wow, this is a bit of a minefield. And the only person I could sort of think of that has got a similar sort of knowledge, this is the UK version of George Lockhart, which is yourself, Richard Kirby. So I thought perhaps what we'll start off is maybe on your sort of journey of education and early days, and where that sort of started and took you to, really.
Yeah, so I guess my sort of background into the health, wellness, fitness, well-being, whatever sort of route you want to call it, started with my own sporting career. So played a vast number of different sports when I was younger, and got fascinated how the skills that I learned in one sport were seemingly transferable to different sports. And that kind of made me realize from quite a young age that it wasn't necessarily the sport that was making me better at the other sports. It was the fundamental and the key principles from within those sports. So being able to catch, being able to throw, being able to coordinate. And that got me fascinated then into why our brains work that way, why we could transfer one thing to another. So I guess the low and behold of that.
Sorry, just on that, what sort of age were you at that point? Because I remember when you started.
Young. Yeah, no, this was before we'd even met. This was before I really started taking up rugby. This was when I was playing mainly football and basketball were my two big sports at that time. Playing sort of national, international level basketball, and football at sort of high club academy level. And it was the goalkeeper in me suddenly picked up a basketball and could hit shots like without even trying. And a local coach said, "You've got an eye for this. Have you ever considered playing basketball?" I said, "Well, no." He said, "Well, where did you learn to shoot like that?" I said, "Well, it's the same as catching a corner and then throwing it over the top." Like, I just made that connection. So this is probably at like 9, 10 years old, and whilst at primary school. And from that age, I then got, I guess obsessed is a word, because it's a word that a lot of people who know me will say that I am. I get quite obsessed over things, and I wanted to know why I could naturally play basketball better than other people, despite having never taken an interest in the sport up until that point. And I guess I knew that made me a little bit different when I went to some national trials, having only been playing basketball for a few months. And there was people there who had played basketball their whole life. They were wearing all the full kit and talking about the games at the weekend. And I thought, I don't belong here. All I cared about was how Blues had got on at the weekend on the football pitch, and didn't really know anything about basketball. But when relating it to basketball, learned there was a big transfer, and that kind of sparked a massive interest, as I say, that I started to realize that there was not only a transfer between all aspects of sport, there's a transfer of all aspects of life. And from that, nutrition, injury, health and performance. And I guess that was where the sort of the fire was started in my belly, and that led to me then wanting to do PE at school all the time, and then going into GCSE PE, A level, university, masters, and it just spiraled from there, really.
It's interesting. So maybe where I sort of caught up with you is when you started with rugby and you were catching the high ball.
That was probably when I think I was year 11 at school, maybe, so like 15, 16. Had only ever played rugby, you know, at school, in school PE, and a couple of matches for the school. But again, my friend Dave Robbins at the time said, "We're short for a rugby game on Saturday. Can you play?" I said, "Yeah, okay, I'll come up and give it a go." And yeah, a ball went up in the air, and as a goalkeeper, I just jumped up in the air and caught it, and everyone kind of stopped and went, "Whoa!" But to me, that was what I was expected to do, because as a goalkeeper, if you don't catch the ball, it's a shock, not if you go up and take it above everyone else. So yeah, I guess that was another kind of moment where it's like, okay, yeah, these transfers aren't as common, so maybe it is a bit different to see transferable skills and to see that there are links between lifestyles and what habits and things like that.
There was a moment when during rugby you started to find this sort of weightlifting.
Yeah.
And I remember just outside the changing rooms or the gym, you were within a few weeks you were cleaning and jerking these barbells.
Yeah.
Very, very mechanically. And it was then that point when I saw that you'd got a very technical sort of mind towards physical sort of attributes of your body. Where did that sort of sudden, or that move to weight training and your body, where did that sort of...
That came from around a similar time to when I started rugby. I had quite a small injury, if you like. It was diagnosed at the time as early onset arthritis in my knee, but I didn't really believe that. I didn't know any different myself at this point. I was not medically trained or anything, but it just didn't feel like I had the same symptoms as someone in their 60s, 70s with an arthritic knee. So I spoke to a physio at the time, and the physio said, well, one way you can try and, you know, alleviate the symptoms and the pain is through strengthening. And I guess that was the kind of breakthrough moment when I realized that, you know, there is always another side to the story. We don't have to accept injury. Injury is something when our body has done something wrong, and we don't have to accept that. We can prevent injury and we can treat injury. So I got speaking to this physio quite in depth, asked a lot of questions. That's one of my key mantras in life, is always ask. Asked a load of questions. They told me that, you know, through certain strengthening of certain muscle groups, you could actually influence the way that that joint was moving. So if I was getting pain in my knee, it's because the knee wasn't functioning how it should be. So if I could favorably strengthen specific muscles, I could get that knee moving closer to how it should do, in layman's terms. And yeah, I guess that then led to me becoming, again, obsessed is a word I'll use, obsessed in moving correctly whilst trying to correct my pain. So I guess that's where the technical element was kind of more important than anything else. And yeah, it's that point that you have to have intention. If your intention is to become pain-free, what's more important is the movement of the joint itself. So that was what I focused most on, was learning the correct technique, and not just the technique of the movement, but digging that little bit deeper in terms of why a joint should move that way. So looking at the actual structure of the joint and making sure that I was moving the most efficient way for that joint.
Interesting. Yeah. I think at that time, it was only a few weeks, maybe a month or so, when suddenly you just started to get really big. And I was like, wow, that's a really quick change in your body makeup and the muscle mass that you have. So a lot of that was movement. What else was that?
So I guess around that same time, around the sort of injury, it all stems from injuries with me, because that's why now my main sort of role is injury prevention and rehabilitation. But around that same time, for me to realize that there was something had gone wrong with my knee, I realized there was two elements to that. One, the knee obviously wasn't strong enough to withstand whatever it was that I did wrong to cause the injury in my knee. But two, the knee wasn't recovering from whatever damage had been caused. So I started at the same time to take an interest in recovery, and the main basing start point for any type of recovery and realizing what happens in our body would be protein. So around that same point, I started to do my own research into how muscle is built and how muscle is maintained. And I stumbled across a very simple equation, which was muscle protein synthesis being greater than muscle protein breakdown. So I just made sure that at that age when I was training, I was getting enough protein in, I was recovering by sleeping properly, training how I knew was technically correct and in the ranges of movement that I knew were correct for my body. And yeah, I guess just took it maybe a little bit more seriously than other people of that sort of age who go in a gym, maybe lift one or two weights very badly, might I add, most people at that sort of age, and then go home and that's it. They then don't think anything of it. Whereas I was thinking a lot more about making sure that I was getting protein in with my lunch and my dinner, and making sure I was getting at least 8 hours sleep, and making sure that I had a periodized training plan that was tracking my progress each session. And just took it quite seriously quite early on, and fell in love with the reason why I was doing it, and fell in love with the knowledge. I had a massive hunger for knowledge, and still do to this day. I'll never sit here and pretend that I even know half of what there is to know about my own supposed expertise. It's, you know, I think that's the most naive thing we can do, is to ever think that we know everything or even close to it. So I guess that came in at a very young age, and that was probably why over that short period of time when I first started to take it serious, I did manage to gain a good amount of muscle.
What was the sort of, what's the sort of equilibrium, if you like, from muscle synthesis and the muscle breakdown? Is there a tip off there, or what?
Yeah, so quite simply put, muscle protein synthesis is obviously the generation of muscle fiber. The muscle protein breakdown is obviously the breakdown of muscle fiber. So throughout our day-to-day life, our muscle is constantly breaking down. Every time we pick something up, put it down, walk around, and every time we obviously eat and sleep, we repair the proteins, the building blocks of our body. So if we're living our normal day-to-day life where we're not particularly putting on weight, we're not losing weight, we're in a calorie balance. Same thing with our muscle. If we're not gaining muscle or losing muscle, we're in an equilibrium between muscle protein synthesis and muscle protein breakdown. So if we're trying to gain muscle, we need to tip the scales in favor of more muscle protein synthesis, so more creation of protein, than what our body's naturally breaking down throughout the day. If we tip the scales that way, we're going to build more muscle. If the scales tip this way, we're going to break down muscle, so we're going to lose muscle. And that's the same with everything in our body. We have osteoclast, osteoblast, so they're the two different processes. The bone formation is created and broken down. We have the same with our skin through the proteins and the collagens in our skin. And as I say, the same with our total weight, with our calorie expenditure and intake. So yeah, it all comes down to, like everything in life, like we've spoke about before, it all comes down to balances. And when you tip the balance one way instead of another, it's going to have a knock-on effect to a whole host of things in your body and in your life.
So it's very much clear there that if you're, you know, as people will have, they'll go, okay, I'm going to beef up, I'm going to do this.
Yeah.
And so they start and go and get their protein shakes, and they start spending hours and hours in the gym, and then they've got a terrible sleep pattern. So they're sort of going to bed at, you know, late at night, not being able to sleep very well, or whatever it is, or they're going out, and a disruption of that really is effectively whatever the good stuff they're doing during the day is completely negatively affected by a sleep pattern, as simple as that. So sometimes you probably even, would you say, go as far as going, like, listen, mate, you're doing everything right apart from the 2 hours that you're doing that weight training, you should be asleep. Would that be a sort of a diagnosis of some people?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the saying, burning the candle at both ends, does kind of come out here, where a lot of people, yeah, you're right, throughout the day they do everything right in the gym, but then they're a bit of a party animal. So, you know, they go out till 3 o'clock in the morning, then they're up at 6 for work. at no point during that waking time during the day is their body in the perfect environment to repair itself. It's in a higher state of breakdown because we're constantly using the muscle. And if we go into a deeper understanding of that, through night is where our body temperature changes, and it's where our hormone excretion changes. So as males, we rely on testosterone to produce most of our muscle growth. That's why we generally have higher muscle percentages than female counterparts. But hormone production obviously spikes through the early hours of the morning. So if we're awake during these periods, we're not going to have the body in an environment where this extra testosterone can be used to help synthesize muscle growth. The same with growth hormone, the same with insulin-like growth factor, and all these other so-called anabolic hormones that help produce muscle and growth and repair. If we're not in a state of sleep where our body can do this repair, we're going to massively hinder how much repair can be done in the limited time that we do sleep. So what will happen is that muscle protein breakdown will be increasingly elevated, but also the muscle protein synthesis will also be elevated. So what we'll actually be doing is just having a high turnover of new muscle, but also losing the muscle that we're putting on. So we will make slight progress, but at nowhere near the rate as if we limited the muscle protein breakdown side to greater tip that scale in the favor that we wanted. And ultimately, the people who do have less sleep will hit a point of overreaching, which is the first sign then before you get into overtraining. And when you get into overtraining, it becomes a chronic illness, and you know that's when there's some really serious health effects that will come in as well with that.
That's really interesting, and I guess maybe some the lack of that testosterone buildup in the early hours. If you're out at night, etc., then there's elements of you as a masculine sort of traditional man, if you like. You're not going to have that buildup of your normal urges, I guess. Would that be fair?
Yeah. I mean, serum testosterone and free testosterone are slightly separate in their correlation within the body. But I mean, I have to be careful what I say here, because this is kind of an amalgamation of ifs and buts. It's never actually been proven in science, but high levels of testosterone that are left as free testosterone and unused by the body can convert into estrogen. And this is a process called aromatization, and it happens naturally, because if we only had testosterone and no estrogen, we'd have all sorts of problems. We'd have really high levels of androgens, and that's when you start to get sort of side effects, if you like, within the body and imbalance. But there is anecdotal suggestions, if you like, that people who sleep less do get more of an aromatization of hormones, and they do get a bigger imbalance in hormones because they're not having complete circadian rhythms. So they're not getting this complete 24-hour cycle of hormones every night at the right times throughout the day. Because as we know, things like daylight synthesis changes obviously certain patterns in our body, the sleep-wake cycle, etc. If our sleep-wake cycle is altered, the levels of UV that come into our body that affect then the cholesterol and the vitamin D absorption are going to have then another knock-on effect on other hormones in our body as well. So if we have a disrupted sleep cycle, that's massively going to affect a whole host of other hormones and what they do and the roles that they play within our body.
Really interesting. It's hilarious, isn't it? We get a phone call just then. That's okay. Yeah, it's really interesting, Rich, and maybe that's a good moment to sort of move towards the professional sort of side of things, where you were at Wolves. And for people that won't know, you were at Wolves as a nutritionist. Sorry, Rich, what was your actual role?
So my official role by the time that I left Wolves was lead strength and conditioning coach for the club. So I was in charge of the strength conditioning, helping the rehabilitation of injured players, and making sure that the rest of the sports science department and other staff members were following plans throughout the whole club. So the structures that we set in the first team, we were making sure that the reserve and the 23s team and the rest of the academy all followed suit as well with our ethos in what we were trying to build.
This is the interesting thing, and what is actually quite outstanding is that the fitness or the injury record for Wolves at the period of time that they're in the Premier League and you were there, was the best within all 4 leagues. Is that correct?
It's the best ever documented from a professional football team.
That's it.
So yeah, it was impressive. It was a good year, and I mean there was a whole hope. We were a big team. We had a big team in terms of the medical team. We had doctors. We had obviously physios, sports therapists, masseuses, podiatrists that were involved with the club, sports science team, strength and conditioning. So it wasn't just one person. We were a team that worked really well together.
And with any sport, and credit to you to sort of have that credit to a whole team, but it does, is a whole team. But would you say, as football clubs throughout the Premier League, throughout the clubs, do you think there's an equal focus on injury prevention across the clubs, or do you think a lot of people are more reactive?
I think it's slightly changing. It was very reactive. It's starting to become a lot more proactive now, and the sort of forerunners of that, whilst we were in the Championship and we were doing what we were doing and really kind of leading the way in the Championship, Leicester City were the real sort of pioneers who really, that the year that they did the unthinkable and won the Premier League, they were so reliant, and when you watch the documentaries about it and things, they were, they controlled everything they could. Down to they were really on it with their injury prevention. They had availability rates that now is the second best ever. We're the only team that ever beat their injury prevention records that Premier League winning season. So I think that just goes to show that the year they won the Premier League, you can't say it was because they had player availability, but anyone who plays a team sport knows that when you've got a team that's full of confidence and it's the same players playing week in, week out, they build a connection and a trust in each other that is unbreakable. And often a team that has that chemistry and that trust in each other and that knowledge of each other's ability and where they'll be on the pitch is worth more than its weight in gold. And you can often punch well above your weight, as arguably Leicester did that year. So I think that kind of led the way. I think Wolves then finishing obviously in the Europa League places, their first season in the Premier League, we kind of showed that there is a lot to be said about this style, and that player availability is worth a heck of a lot more than just mixing things up tactically. And I think now more and more we're starting to see a lot more teams being a lot more proactive and putting a lot more emphasis on injury prevention, monitoring training load, and basically trying to stop injuries from happening rather than just treating them when they do.
It's quite incredible that is. And I suppose from that point in, I mean, you must have really enjoyed that experience. Tell me a bit more about some of the case studies maybe for some of the guys that perhaps were the biggest challenges, or maybe the guys that really were focused and listened to you, maybe with that environment.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the main thing really is to understand that we're in a professional football club, so all of the players there obviously are paid to be there. It's not that it's just amateurs, because I mean, I've tried to envision this sort of philosophy into a host of different teams and things over the past couple of years since being self-employed and trying to get this ethos into everyone that I coach and every team that I've coached. And it's just not possible, because it takes complete 100% buy-in. So we're relying on the players turning up early to training, to do extra stretching, to do extra activation, turning up early to give urine samples so we can measure the hydration status of them before they even set foot in the gym, following specific foods depending on their how much training they've done the day before or the week before, the relationship between the training loads. We're looking at protein intake, carbohydrate intake, even down to giving players collagen supplements who've had tendinopathies and tendon injuries in the past. There is nothing that was left to chance. So as much as we rely on the players buying into the philosophies, it's also important to remember that these are professionals who this is their job. It's not realistic to expect the average Joe in a local semi-professional team to do the same. But that being said, there were players obviously who were a lot more into it than others. And whenever this question gets asked, the first name that always comes up is Conor Cody, as anyone would expect. Wolves captain. He was absolutely exemplary. He was always the first one in. He'd make sure everything was done properly. if one of the other lads wasn't doing their exercises, he'd go and put his arm around them. So we as coaches weren't always the ones to say, look, lads, come on, focus. There's a reason you're doing this. He was absolutely incredible in that sense. And
why would you say his experience is there from there? Because, you know, I've heard, you know, he looks a great, I've talked on our Everton chat rooms. It'd be brilliant to get Connor Cody to Goodison Park, if you like. And yeah, whilst, you know, a solid player, this is the element of the professionalism that you don't really see, sort of thing, on a 90-minute game. So what is it about him that's got his complete buy-in? Do you think
he is an out-and-out leader? There's no other way to describe it. He was born to lead, and he leads by example. So, you know, all the other players see his influence and see how good he is for the club, but see that he's such a likable, genuine guy that just loves and lives and breathes football. You know, he's the sort of person that if you walked past him in the park and your ball went over to him, he'd kick it back to you and say, can I join in, lads? Like jumpers for goalposts. He just lives and breathes football. And when you've got that much passion and that much charisma, coupled with a desire to do well, people stop and listen. When he talks, people shut up and they listen, if they can understand him, because he's got a very heavy Scouse accent.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's really interesting. So Rich, you're there riding a crest of the wave, and you know, really enjoying being in the professional game. Not as glamorous as perhaps the £100 million contracts for certain footballers.
If only.
I mean, the money side of things may have been a different thing, but you sort of made this decision at the end of this to really gamble and go on your to go on your own. So tell me a bit more about that sort of decision mindset.
So I guess with all journeys, they come to an end, and it's deciding when that correct time is to kind of jump ship, if you like. And I first got involved with the club in League One, left them in Europa League. For me, it felt like the right time. There were certain things that would be going on at the club over the next 12 months that would have made my job a lot harder. Not harder is in the terms of, obviously I like a challenge. Harder in terms of socially, there's going to be a lot more time restraints. We were going to be traveling all around Europe on different days of the week, having to stay over for weeks at a time. And I was at a point in my life where I wanted to regain some control over my social life, if you like. I'd just moved in with my now fiance Josie. We'd just moved in together, and one thing that will always stick with me is the day after we moved in together, I had to jet off on a private jet to Marbella for an 8-day training camp, leaving poor Josie to live in this new place on her own with no furniture, unpacking everything. And I felt so guilty, and it kind of made me realize that yes, I was living the high life, having a great time, getting paid to run around a football pitch with a load of professionals, literally running on the pitch when we scored, all the highlights of everything, but I wasn't actually in charge of my life at all. I had an incredible manager in Nuno, but he was a solid manager. He liked the players to work hard. There wasn't very many days off. When we did get days off, don't get me wrong, he'd give you a weekend off. People would go abroad, things like that. But in professional sport, you can't take many days off. So there was a lot of back-to-back 7-day weeks. You know, through pre-season in particular, there was 15, 16-hour days back-to-back. The travel time then to and from Wolverhampton turned 15-hour days into 18-hour days. And with my understanding, obviously, of sleep that we spoke about shortly a minute ago, you know, I realized that it wasn't necessarily healthy for me, and I wanted to get some control back. And with the skill set that I'd learned, the reputation I'd built up for myself within the strength and conditioning rehabilitation environment, I kind of put a few feelers out there, gauged a bit of interest, and yeah, just kind of then went for it. It was the end of the season, handed in my notice, and after chats with some people at the club in the direction of the club and the club's vision and things, decided, we made the decision, notice went in, parted ways, and that was it. Served out my notice period on gardener's leave so they could get staff in straight away, rather than me doing more work through pre-season and having to get someone in at the end of pre-season. They gracefully, and I'm very thankful that they did. They let me leave on gardener's leave while still on full pay, which enabled me the time to really invest into creating RKEP, which is my business now, Rich Kirby Elite Performance.
Brilliant, Rich. And there's a lot of things in there, and credit to you for considering Josie, who is, you know, just a brilliant person herself. And you guys make such a brilliant team. You know, on the face of it, of course, there's going to be ups and downs with everything, I'm sure. But what you're sort of saying is that your consideration for her is absolutely brilliant. But the will to be in control, the will to be in control of your own time and your own diary. Is the crucial thing, isn't it? When you have, or however good your boss is, or however good the hierarchy above you is, you're still a number at the end of that tree, aren't you?
Exactly. That if I had to summarize in one sentence, it would be that: time freedom. Not necessarily, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that I work less hours than I was at Wolves, but I can choose when. I can pick and choose holidays. I can just tell clients, you know, on the 17th of May, I'm going to be away because I've got a wedding to go to that day, or it's a family birthday. You know, I can book these off. Whereas if I walked into Nuno's office and said on the 17th of May, he'd have gone, yeah, Crystal Palace away in London, you're there. You know, there's no negotiation. If the team are there, you're there. It was as simple as that. And you know, as I say, and I was very fortunate that Nuno and Antonio, two guys. Obviously, Antonio was Nuno's right-hand man when it came to the sort of fitness side of things, if you like. They were both very kind and agreed that I didn't have to go to every single match with the team on the coach. They were happy for me to drive up on the day myself, which gave me a little bit more freedom to just meet the team. So if we were playing Crystal Palace away, the team would go on a Friday morning, whereas I'd make sure that I'd stay at the training ground on the Friday, make sure everything was packed up with kit men, because we had to take a whole gym equipment with us to every single match, which was a logistical side of the job that no one knows about. But we'd take pretty much a whole gym into the changing rooms with us, all state-of-the-art equipment, different tablets for different machines, tablets as in like iPads to get force readings for the players in the warm-ups, everything like that. So I said to them, look, I'll help the kit man get all this organised to make sure everything's ready at the stadium, and I'll meet you the other end. So that gave me Friday nights with family and friends and things, but then early Saturday morning, I'd have to drive all over the country to meet back up with the team by Saturday morning breakfast in the hotel. So yeah, time freedom. Whilst they were don't get me wrong, they were incredible at Wolves, and they gave me certain elements of time freedom to help with my lifestyle, but we always want more. And it doesn't take a long time before that little taste of freedom makes you want complete control over your diary yourself.
That's that was certainly my my own sort of will, was to just be in control of my own diary. That was it, you know, just and actually it's taken a lot. You'd think something similar, as simple as that. It's like, okay, well, just take control of your own diary, you know, set it out. But it's taken a long time, I think, really, for myself personally, almost 5 years to really be in control of my own diary in terms of filling it with things that you want to do, what you're good at, what you get paid to do, what's good for the world in terms of my sort of ikigai. And it's still a work in progress, and there's always things.
Always will, won't it? It always will.
Absolutely. In fact, little baby Gigi's just woken up, and I think they're going to go outside. Let me bear with me for a second.
No problem, of course.
Bear with me. Should we say hello to Rich? So look at this. Who's Rich?
Hello.
Hello. You gonna wave? Are you gonna wave?
Oh, beautiful. Oh. What beautiful eyes. Hello. Yes.
You waving?
Oh, bless.
Right. Okay. Fantastic. Tash, close that. There we go. It's a nice interval. Very good. So she's just woken up. They're going to go out. You know, I think for me, being in control of my own diary has got its pluses and minuses. Working for myself and having so many other distractions that perhaps weren't particularly in the original diary.
Yeah,
Is well, you just got to always evolve and move. So Rich,
absolutely.
so I suppose it would be, I mean, let's talk about now what you're doing professionally on a sort of day-to-day basis, the type of things that you're helping with. Yeah.
Okay, so I offer a whole host of services. Everything is based around elite performance, and it's not necessarily just for professionals. I work with people in their everyday to-day life, but it's about redefining and allowing them to achieve their own level of elite within themselves. So I work with a whole host of people, from professional footballers, professional rugby players, athletes, badminton players, your average everyday person who just wants to get fitter and get healthier, people who've been told by the doctors they need to lose weight or they need to increase mobility because they've got arthritis, or, you know, a whole host of things. But I guess it all still comes under, you know, my kind of strapline, if you like, is that I'm a strength conditioning and rehabilitation expert. But I do dabble, and I have got qualifications, and I do work on people with their nutrition. And yeah, anything that basically can be encompassed under performance is kind of what I do. But mainly it's strength conditioning and rehabilitation work with people.
The appetite to be fit and to be as best as you can be physically is obviously something that's pressured under, you know, if you're playing sport, if you're playing professional sport, if you're playing amateur sport, etc.
Yeah.
Where's the appetite, and what sort of level of appetite is there for people that perhaps at the end of their careers looking to retire? Where's the appetite for being as best as they can be physically there, or is it just not there?
I'd say it's kind of inverted. That's where people generally have the biggest appetite, because they don't want to let go yet. They want to keep playing, and they want to do what they can. And, you know, we hear the cliche all the time that, you know, it's for professionals who don't want to, you know, they want to extend their contract by another year, so they suddenly start trying harder and things like that. But I don't think by that point it's ever about the money. It's about the lifestyle change. They're not ready to let go of the lifestyle that they have. And it's quite sad, really, in that sense, because I know I'm going slightly off topic here, but it's something that definitely needs to be mentioned, that in professional sport, you do become institutionalized. And we know that army veterans and people who come out of service get counseling, they get help on transitioning back into a civilian life. But it's very limited what support there is for professional sports people who transition out of being told literally every day by someone else what to eat, what to drink, when to eat, what to do in a gym, what to do with every hour of your day is controlled and told to you by your club. So it's hard for them to let go of that. So it's not really the money at the end point of their career. You often see players drop down through the leagues. You know, they've gone from being on hundreds of thousands of pounds a week to playing for Solihull Moors for maybe £500 a week. And that just shows you that it's not about the money. It's the fact that they don't know what to do with their life, and they're not ready to transition just yet. So I'd say the appetite, going back to your original question, is that they want to stay involved in the sport that they have a passion and a love for. And it's not always just sport. You know, I see people in their 60s and 70s who I coach who just want to be able to carry on playing walking football or playing golf. You know, that they don't want to completely retire into a sedentary lifestyle. They want to carry on playing and doing the things that they've loved. So yeah, I'd say everyone has a different trigger, but when people realize that the thing that they love doing might be taken away from them, they often actually increase their appetite and want more sessions and want to keep it going.
I think from an amateur rugby sort of side of things, and that's the only experience that I can see, is I could absolutely vouch for the fact that you still want to be involved, or you want to be a part of it. Physically, perhaps you can't do the it really gave you the routine, the Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, you know, that sort of element. And I completely miss it. You completely miss the lads, and there is a passion and a will to be still involved. And I think there's definitely a lot of work that needs to be done across amateur and professional sports to give people some responsibility and open doors to allow and enable this, because I do feel that that's sort of off the edge of the cliff in terms of your routine, your physical, the interaction with your teammates, all of those things that you just stop doing is immensely difficult to substitute.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's why it's getting more and more common now, thankfully. that towards the end of careers, players are getting a lot more support on a professional terms, maybe not so much in amateur, but again, everything comes down to money. There's not the money in the infrastructure of amateur sport to help people who have to retire. And I guess the argument for that is that amateur sport wouldn't have been as much of a say on their life, because they still have other jobs that dictate what they do throughout the rest of their lives, but so the rest of their days. But yeah, in professional sport, it is getting more and more common now, and there are less stories that you hear of players becoming addicted to gambling, for instance, is the one that you see quite a lot in football. Because again, I don't think, this is me just completely guessing now, this is nothing clinical or scientific, but I don't think that it's the money that they're gambling to chase. It's the thrill, it's the adrenaline, it's having that moment of, you know, that excitement that they don't get anymore from not being able to play the sport. They don't need the money because they've built up a career of good paychecks. I genuinely think it is purely the excitement and having a purpose again in their day.
The dopamine release, you know, that thing that you're always, you know, so whether that can be a natural or a non-natural sort of high, if you like, I suppose that feeling of scoring a goal or that last minute, that last minute try, you're not going to replicate that. You're certainly not going to replicate it in a casino unless you hit 888 and you keep tripling up. But yeah, okay, but yeah, I can sort of see that sort of that route going. That's really interesting. Rich, I've asked quite a few good things. We've had a really lovely conversation, I think, for about 45 minutes, and I think that's really good.
Yeah.
I'm gonna have a look and see what else I mentioned, because I thought I've slightly lost my my flow. It was really
no problem.
That was some really good stuff there.
Good. Glad I can answer questions. As silly as that sounds, it's good to actually have a train of conversation that, you know, it's easy to kind of throw away answers without thinking about it sometimes. You know, I always, when I do things like this, I always come off it usually thinking, oh, I wish I'd said that, or I wish I'd mentioned that. But this is flowing really nicely, and I feel like everything that we're talking about, we're getting into good depth with. So it's good. It's good.
Brilliant, Rich. And I think, you know, I was going to sort of perhaps have a conversation with Josh been here. He said last night, he's like, oh yeah, I'd love to be on that. I've just realised it was his birthday today. He didn't even actually mention it. So I'd like to bring him on. He was going to ask a little bit more about the spike proteins. This is a question that we perhaps might chop off. But the question was around when I was looking at the spike proteins. Proteins are obviously key to the, you know, the injury prevention, the synthesis, as you say, and the breakdown. Yeah. So when I read about spike proteins being in the vaccine, and then also being responsible for allowing viruses into body, it started to make me think, you know, is the thing that we've been injected in a natural thing, but that's also the gateway for a virus? I didn't quite understand how that really sort of makes sense. I don't know if you're able to enlighten me a little bit with that.
So I think the first thing to mention here is that proteins are the building blocks of everything in our body. It's not just muscle and it's not just tissues. Absolutely everything in our body is encoded for and responsible through protein signaling, proteins being shifted around the body in different ways. So a spike protein, if you like, is like an identifying protein. It's something unique to a specific, in this case, virus. So SARS-CoV-2, COVID, whatever you want to call it, will have a specific spike protein that basically identifies it as different to all of the other coronaviruses and SARS viruses. The mRNA side of things and the spike protein itself, I am not 100% clued up on. But if I talk generally about spike proteins and what they can do, yeah, you're spot on, and no one can deny that the presence of a spike protein can influence your body's natural response to said spike protein, but it can also weaken your defense to other proteins entering the body, because your body's created these neutral defense cells, if you like, from your immune system have been encoded through the mRNA to fight a specific spike protein. This spike protein has already been then put into your body through either the vaccine or through then catching COVID subsequently. As most, that's very wrong. A lot of people we find do catch COVID after having the vaccine. And I guess the argument here is the same thing you're kind of posing the question: is it the vaccine that's causing people to catch COVID? Can we answer this categorically through science? No. Are there a lot of respected doctors out there who believe that it is the case? Yes. Are the spike proteins a gateway? Yes, in essence, they can act as a gateway because it is a protein that your body now recognizes and allows in. Your body then supposedly has the defense mechanism to fight it off, but in reality, it's much slower. And it does also then increase the chances of other illnesses taking effect, because these, as I say, these neutral white blood cells and like that you have in your body are unable to, they've already been biased towards fighting off a specific invasion, if you like, rather than being able to just deal with the generic colds and rhinoviruses and coronaviruses and the other normal viruses that our body comes into contact with almost every day. So yeah, I am not as clued up on it as I have been in the past. As I mentioned to you before, I haven't really done much digging recently. I've been really busy with work myself, but there are plenty of elements of this spike protein sort of conundrum, if you like, that yeah, I would be inclined to say in short that I'm not convinced by the effect, and I think there is a lot more research needed to be done on the effects that mRNA as a base for a vaccine and indeed the specific proteins that are attached to this particular vaccine. But that's just my personal opinion.
Absolutely, and it's just nice to get such a rounded answer. Thanks, Rich, for that, because it is a conundrum, and thankfully it's not something that I've looked into much recently. I think you can start, as an inquisitive mind as you are, you can keep digging and then sometimes things just don't make sense, and the more you think about it, you just think there's something wrong here. But for me, I'm enjoying spending a lot more time in the garden. Spring is here, things are growing.
Absolutely.
And you can be in control of what you can be in control of, and that's it. And that's something that I've really sort of tried to work on myself for a long time. It's easier said than done. But yeah, personally, there's a lot of other things that you can be in control of and you can actually affect. And actually, it'd probably be quite nice to sort of finish towards this area here in terms of that. Getting back your social life and getting back the things that you like to do. It's absolutely brilliant to see you get back into your rugby. I didn't think you'd do it because you obviously need your body to do your job, and so there's an element of risk that you put in place there for that. But tell me a bit about why you've done that and what rewards are you getting that from personally.
So first of all, the first thing I want to address there is, as you mentioned at the end, the risk of injury for me in work, and that's where it's ironic in the sense of that's the part that I actually felt most confident about, because for the last 7 years it's been my job to keep other people fit and healthy and able to play. So it's time to take my own medicine, so to speak, and see if I could do it for myself. And thankfully, touch wood, I've come through the season without any serious injury. I mean, those who know me closer know that I've got to have surgery on my ankle, but that's not specifically through just rugby. That's through just general sort of genetic condition, if you like, that I've had in my heel for quite a while. I injured my ankle, rehabbed it myself, didn't miss any game time through that. But as a result of that, it's just kind of exacerbated the issue that I had underlying genetically with prominent heel bones and bones that are quite prominent. So I've got to have surgery, hopefully, before we get too far into the off season, so I won't have to miss any game time next year. But again, through my own understanding and my own prehab and injury prevention, it's minor surgery. You know, I'll be on crutches for a couple of weeks, but still able to work. So this was the main thing for me getting back into it, was weighing up the pros and cons, as you say. And I decided that the enjoyment and the desire and the rugby bug, as you know, as it is, was much stronger than my lack of belief in myself, if you like, because there's never a fear of injury for me. Injuries happen, but it was more, do I trust myself and my expertise to prevent those injuries that do happen from just being niggles into turning something more serious? And yes, I did. I knew that I'd stretch properly, I'd warm up properly, I would make sure that my joints were strong, I'd do all my prehab and strengthening, my balance and stability. The only thing I couldn't control for was impacts. But there's no reason to say, you know, you can't just fall over and twist your ankle, break your neck. You know, as poignant as that one is, it can happen, and it does happen, and that's the things that we can't control. And you know, and touching on that topic of necks and things, obviously we both know Lee and Window very well, and that is an injury that we would categorize in football as something that cannot be controlled for, no matter how much injury prevention and how much you know and how much you train. You can't account for moments like that. So my sort of take on getting back into rugby is, injuries, as catastrophic as that is, or as small as some of them can be, if it's not one that I could have controlled, why worry about it? If it's something I could control, if I pulled a hamstring, that's my own fault. So that was my take on it. And yeah, as I say, the rugby bug, the bite was a lot stronger than the whatever would be pushing me away from choosing not to play again.
That's an interesting equation or formula that you've sort of discovered yourself, in terms of that's the balance and that's the trade-off.
Yeah.
And in terms of freak injuries, you know, happening to Window was obviously absolutely devastating to those around him, not least for himself. But the fact that he's managed to get through that with the support of people and just keep him moving forward has been something that everybody locally is benefiting from.
Yeah, absolutely.
That you're experiencing is probably just harnessed and multiplied because of what is happening and how many, and that sort of momentum within teams, within community.
That shows the rugby community. It's that community that you miss. It's not just the playing on the pitch. That may be a large part of it, but as you know yourself, it's hard even when you stop playing to stay away from the club, because the energy and the atmosphere is infectious. And you know, that's the fact that Window is so involved in the club as he is still is testament to him as a character, but to rugby as a sport.
And it's great that things that build like this actually do give those guys that perhaps have stopped playing an outlet to come up and watch, come up and see what momentum is happening. And actually, there's more and more crowds coming up to watch. I would say we're actually almost getting a crowd instead of a few people watching. It's
absolutely.
Like that. So when you go up there and you see Josie up there and friends, it's a bit more social. You can sort of talk to each other and experience that you know, the entertainment with each other. I think it's building lovely, and hopefully we can watch you in Midlands or Level 6, Regional 2.
Regional 2 classes now we are, yeah.
As the pyramids sort of start changing a little bit, and it's going to be really exciting. And you know, with that team, the whole team, the coaching setup, the forwards, the backs, the coaching, you know, all of these sort of people that are contributing and being empowered to put their sort of stamp on the success and improvement. I think it's a really embryonic time, even for, you know, for the Silver. I think it feels like whilst we've had a promotion this year and some incredible, we've won every game this year. Is that right?
Yeah, we won every game this year.
That's incredible. But it still feels that it's just the beginning.
Absolutely. And I think that's what's special about this group of lads that we've got at the moment, is that the sky really is the limit. As cliche as that is, we don't feel like, you know, we've kind of hit the peak and now we're back to square one, we've got to start again for next year. It is very much, you know, this is just the beginning. How far can this team go on and off the pitch? You know, there's a really special feel there. And when you look at the teams in the league next year and their results, and you look at who we've played, who they've played, and how we've got on, there's a genuine belief that we can go on and do something special in next year's league as well. And there's no reason why we can't have back-to-back promotions. And that's something that we all truly believe.
one of the sort of identities of a Sills team is a team that punches well above their weight. It seems to be that. We've always been a smaller sort of setup. Granted, we've got some larger guys in there now, but that is the sort of character that we have, and it's very interesting. As you mentioned right at the beginning, we were talking about the team and the effect that by working together, that belief, it does enable you to, like the Leicester City, it does enable you to overperform or certainly perform regularly at a standard that's just more harmonious, isn't it? Really?
Again, it's cliche. There's a lot of cliches, but team, together, everyone achieves more. When that cliche saying or acronym or whatever you want to call it is spot on. It really is. Everyone does achieve more when you work together. And no one knows that more than me, giving Matt Lee so many assists this season. Every ounce of me wanted to stop him getting top try scorer, and for the majority of the season I was leading him, but then played Old Cobs at home and I gave him 5 assists in the one game, because that was the biggest shift for me, is when you've got personal rivalry with your teammates for top try scorer and things like that, but when it comes down to, obviously we're on a massive run, I'd give that pass 10 times out of 10 to make sure that the team scores, and that's credit to what we've built as a team, and that's credit to Tom Manise as director of rugby, Ollie Beach, Rod, the other coaches, everyone at the club who's created that ethos within the club, this rise mentality. And I had a chat with Tom as director about the excellence part, and how I think there's a lot more we can do as a club to strive to excellence in everything that we do on and off the pitch. And I think that's what we're really starting to see now, is that people are taking a lot of pride in excellence and what excellence looks like.
It's for me, it's like a center of effort and excellence, and I think that's going to be interesting to find out where you see as the sort of tipping point and that boundary of the professionalism that they're getting paid to put in the 100% effort to achieve everything, and that balance of what people are, or how much you're going to get out of people that are giving it up as their sort of hobby.
So I guess the simple answer for that, for me, that comes straight to mind, which is the point that I want to make over the off season, really, is that everyone can be excellent. The only difference between professional and amateur is the amount of time you can offer excellence for. Everyone who comes to training for an hour on a Tuesday, hour on a Thursday, match day on a Saturday, the times when you are at the club, you give 100% excellence. There is no messing around. There is no taking the mick. Obviously, have fun, have a bit of banter. But when it comes to running lines, practicing drills, tactics, formation, you make sure that you're there 5 minutes early and you don't leave until that session's finished, and you give 100% to that session. That's what I would class as excellence. We're not asking people to turn up 3 hours early, make sure they've had the perfect breakfast, the perfect lunch. Just the time that you do commit to the club, commit 100% of you to that time.
Rich, it's interesting you mentioned that figure of 80%, because I know that you're an 80-20 guy as well. So tell me if there is any Ben rule within that 100% on an 80-20 rule.
Yeah, I mean, I guess my take on 80-20 is you give 100% 80% of the time. It's not that you give 80% 100% of the time. So I guess that's where it comes down to, when you're at the club and when you're at training and when you're doing things for the club, you do it at 100%. The 20%, I guess, comes in the changing room before and after, when you're having a laugh in the showers or a beer after, things like that. Or when you're collecting the balls in from a drill, that's where the 20% of the fun side comes in. You have a bit of banter. But if the coaches are telling you to run a line and you're talking to someone, that's not disruptive to you. And I know it's cliche and I sound like a school teacher, but you're disrupting the whole class. And it really is that. And I think that's where in previous years we've had incredibly talented squads, but the actual application that's where it's gone wrong. We always talk about Sills teams of the past would have lost that game because they wouldn't have stayed switched on until the last minute. And I truly believe that that's a reflection on your focus levels within training, and that is literally what then transfers to how you play on a match day.
Muscle memory, and the going through these phases. Rich, it's been absolutely Brilliant to talk to you. I think for me, I could ask you a lot of questions on off piece and lots of different things, but I think we've really gathered some brilliant um, content there, and I think we've had a really good, smart meeting, which I think will be really educational for people. Hopefully it is. Hopefully it's been interesting. Is there anything you want to say about the business, how people can get in touch with you? And that would be brilliant.
Yeah, I mean, I as I said before, I take on all clients. Doesn't matter what your background or what your goal. I help you get to it. So if you wanted to look through the services I offer in more detail, just hop onto my website, which is www.richkirbyeliteperformance.co.uk. All the information's on there. How to contact me. All my social media channels are all on there. It's all on there.
That's brilliant, Rich. And I think just to sort of open up that element of the nutrition that you are interested in, and certainly that Josie is expert in as well. For me, that's something you've really helped me with in terms of giving me a plan of exactly what's good to eat, what I need to eat, what's essential for my body. So if people do want to get in touch with you from that sort of side of things, nutrition, as much as maybe you're not bodybuilding or looking at your body physically too much or whatever, but certainly it's an avenue that should be going down to and getting in touch with Rich, because as I said at the beginning, the expert knowledge that you have is, and it's an absolute gift for us to be able to sort of ask you these questions and have access to you. So I'd advise anyone, if they do want to think about how they're eating or maybe their sleep plans or put some plans together, then absolutely get in touch with Rich. Rich, thank you for today. It's been class.
No, thank you, Jim.